Is old school fishing obsolete? The good old days of bass fishing, are they gone? Can you still catch fish on traditional lures with traditional techniques? All the things we read about in Bassmaster magazine, and all the things from the 90s, the 80s, maybe even the 70s for some of y'all. Is that stuff elite? Is it elite? Is it gone? Is it obsolete? I'm gonna tell you what sparked my, is that a word, sparked? I'm gonna tell you what sparked my thought process on this. Larry Melton. Larry Melton is a YouTuber as well. I'll leave a link for his channel in the description box. He made a comment on one of my YouTube videos earlier this week. If you watch my channel, you know earlier this week I was talking about fall fishing and how a lot of the fall fishing news that we put out on the internet lacks context. If you're consuming fall fishing videos right now, you really got to make sure you're consuming fall fishing videos with context of where you live. What I'm trying to say is if you fish glacial lakes in the Northeast and then you listen to me talk about how I catch fish in September, October, November during the fall on Lake Hartwell here in South Carolina, the two things they don't connect very well. So Larry Melton made the comment on my YouTube video that basically he's learned everything that he knows about fishing from YouTube, which I thought was, number one, a very vulnerable comment to make in today's society, the way we demonize anything on the internet as if the internet is somehow just fake knowledge. It's not all fake knowledge. It's just some things lack context. I was very vulnerable in to say that, I feel like. And then immediately after he made this post, you saw a couple comments under it, basically telling, you need to learn from some old heads. You need to learn from some old, as we would call it, real fishermen. And so, I don't know, something about that irked me. I'm at this weird age where I'm stuck in between. I'm not really an old head, but kinda. But then I'm young enough that I know what Larry's talking about, because there's things that I do where I learn completely from the internet. I learned how to ride a motorcycle primarily from the internet. I didn't have any old school. I did have some old school teachers, but most of the information I got was from the internet. I do things other than fishing, other things that I know. And so I have a respect for the internet. I have a respect for the way younger people learn. And then I have experienced and got a lot of my knowledge from old school people. But I hate when we act like somehow the old school people did it better than fishermen today. They did not do it better, man. They did not do it better. When we talk about even tournament fishing, I mentioned this before. When it comes to tournament fishing, people somehow believe that the young fishermen now are not doing it better than fishermen 20, 25, 30 years ago. And that's simply not the case. If that is the case, there's a lot of things we have to ignore. Okay, let's just talk from an influencer standpoint first. Then we're going to talk about competition. I want to talk about influencer standpoint, old school versus new school, and then I want to talk about competition from old school to new school. First thing, from an influencer standpoint, we're talking about YouTubers, fishing teachers online, whatever the case may be. Okay, I would fit into that category right now. I guess I would be the new school version of influencers. What was the old school version of influencers? It was Bill Dance, Hank Parker, Jimmy Houston, Orlando Wilson, those guys, Bassmaster magazine, any publications that you may have read when you were young. That was the old school version. Okay. Now, often what you're going to hear is people say that, well, those guys, they did it right. They were real fishermen. They did this, they did that. They're so much better than these young kids today running around fishing farm ponds, doing this, that, and the other. They didn't have electronics, etc. That really irks me. And I have a relationship with a couple of those guys, and I'm not cutting down anything that they've done. It frustrates me when we act like the influencers of the 80s and 90s and early 2000s were somehow doing it better than a Kicking Their Bass TV, a Fishing with Yak Pack, the Googans, who's Fluke Master, Fishing with Norm. We pretend that the old school guys did it better or more pure than that group of anglers. And we completely ignore the fact that a lot of those influencers of old were fishing in farm ponds, private phosphate lakes. Was it real fishing or not? I want you to really be honest with yourself. They were fishing in artificial environments, filming TV shows, and telling us how we should fish our home lake and how they set up on points and did this, that, and the other. Bro, they were fishing artificial environments. I know that hurts a lot of our old guys. I grew up on that. You know, I'll tell you one that was real from old school, the lenders. Them lenders, they were catching them. That was real fishing. Probably one of the realest fishing on YouTube was the lenders. The lenders did real stuff. But even at that, do you guys not realize when you watch those videos, they were editing a lot of times. I know this for a fact. Sometimes it might take them 2 or 3 days to put together a 22-minute show. They didn't catch them all in that one day. They had to piece that stuff together because sometimes fishing is just tough like that. But then when we see actual, real, authentic fishing, it may be guys fishing the bank. It may be guys fishing some type of pond in their neighborhood. It may be some guy fishing a lake and he's catching 1.5 to 2 pounders. But it's actual real fishing. If you ask me, we have access to more real fishing now than we ever have before. When we were watching those TV shows on TNN on Sunday night back 20, 30 years ago, I guess it's been 30 years ago, 35 years ago, we don't know what we were getting. We don't know how long it took for them to get that shows. We don't know what farm pond they had private access to. And I don't think we're being truthful about that. If we're being honest, today's ambassadors and influencers are way more authentic and way more real than the generation that I had. I know that hurts a lot of feelings, but I'm going to keep it on moving. Let's go to competition. I've mentioned this before on my channel. You know what we already say about today's fishermen versus the fishermen of old, 80s, 90s guys. Probably the peak of bass fishing was the early 2000s. 2000 to 2008 was the peak of it, right? So most of the times we say, well, these kids now, they rolling the dice on mama and daddy's dime. They have these electronics, yada da da da, da 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 da, blase blee. That's what everybody's saying, okay? And these guys, these kids now don't deserve it. You know what? There's number one thing that bothers me about that. I hope and pray that that's the story for my kids. I hope and pray that that's the story for my kids. That's what I strive for. And then I hope that's the deal for my grandkids. I hope that I have so much that my kids just got to put in the work. That's what I strive for. I see that from other parents, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I want for my kids. I don't want them to have to struggle. I don't know why we glorify struggle. I did have to struggle, but then I had this weird thing where I had to struggle, and then I was very privileged at the same time. You know what my privilege was? Is I had a dad that worked really hard and started businesses, and I got to see how business worked inside of my house every day, all day. I got to see my dad talk with clients. I got to see him negotiate deals. I learned how to negotiate and do deals and run a business from my dad. That was the privilege that I have. And so many people don't have that privilege to see that inside their home. I had this weird thing where I wasn't poor, but I didn't have enough money to do fishing. We were not poor. I will never sit here and tell you that I was poor. I also didn't have money either. You got to understand the difference between that. You may understand it, you may not. I was not poor, but I did not have money. Okay? Do whatever you want to with that. So I'm hoping that I can provide those opportunities for my kids. And I hope my grandkids, my kids provide those opportunities for my grandkids, and so on and so on. Parents paying for their kids to fish does not bother me one bit. I'm not even worried about it. That is not a problem. But when you undercut what kids are doing now, they're putting in the work. I see it day in and day out. I work with them inside of my app. I know the work they're putting in. I can spot a true fisherman a mile away. We cut those down and we build up and act like the fishermen of the 80s and 90s did it better. The fishermen that you know about, I tell people this all the time. They were going out with guides. They were going out with locals. They weren't doing it any more pure than fishermen are doing it now. Matter of fact, I get less calls when people come to Hartwell now than I did 10 years ago. Now that we got electronics, because people go out and do it on their own. It was the information era, pandemic. It was the information pandemic in the 80s and 90s. The guy that had the most money, had the most contacts, had the biggest Rolodex. Hey, some of y'all young kids don't know what a Rolodex is. You had phone numbers. It was in this thing. It was a black book of phone numbers that you would go through. You had everybody's number. Kentucky Lake, I got 6 contacts. We go to Gunnerville, I got 10 contacts. We're going to Lake Hartwell, I got 4 contacts. Let me call this guy as soon as we see it on the schedule. That was the era. That was the era of the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, really up until about 10 or 15 years ago. That was how you did good at fishing, was your Rolodex. And we keep that quiet and act like somehow that those old school fishermen were pure. They weren't. They were not pure. They were getting information from locals, and they were going out with guides, and they were putting them on fish, and they would go back in the tournament and catch them. They were no more pure than the anglers are today. That is a fact. You can fuss with me in the comments as much as you want to. Ain't nobody did it more pure than anybody else, okay? So we have to be careful about pretending, having this illusion that old school anglers did everything better than what we do it today. Truth be told, the old school anglers, and I'm going to bring this home, the old school anglers were the foundation for what we have today. So if you don't like what we have today, old school anglers, they built the foundation for us. If you like what we have today, which I like what we have going on today, the old school anglers were the foundation for it. I don't want my kids to be less of a fisherman than I am, or less at anything, less at business than I am. And those old school guys, the Dance, the Parkers, Houstons, all those guys, they started something and we stacked that experience. We looked at what they did, we got inspired for them and put our own twist to it. What they did was good, and what we're doing is good, period. What they did was no purer than what we're doing today, and what we're doing is just as pure as what you watched on TNN on Sunday night, period. So we got to be careful about that, folks. Everybody's stacking the experience. They're building inspiration from the generation before us. There's no need to cut down the anglers of the day. They're just as pure as the anglers that you and I grew up fishing, watching fish on TV.